Question: where does our consciousness go when we sleep or we are in a coma? This is the main argument of scientists disproving consciousness after death. On the other hand, non-duality teachers say that deep sleep, where nothing is happening, is our true nature, and that the world of movement is the illusion, and we need to awaken the deep sleep inside us. For me, this doesn't make sense. Can you please elaborate, because I'm confused? Well, okay. What I have said in many of my videos is that we have 4 levels of the mind. There's the purely physical part of the mind that is tied into the body. It's basically the body computer. Then we have the emotional level of the mind, the mental level, and the identity level. And it's a matter of raising the vibration. The densest vibration is the physical, a little bit higher is the emotional, then the mental, then the identity. Beyond that, of course, is the spiritual, where our spiritual self resides. And so, what is the you that can be either awake or asleep? Because we have to look at ourselves and say, okay, sometimes I'm awake, sometimes I'm asleep. What's the you that can be in either state? And that's what I have in several videos explained as what I call the conscious you, which is an extension of our higher self that resides in, has taken embodiment in these 4 levels of the mind: the identity, mental, emotional, and physical. So, to just give a crude illustration, it's just an illustration, you could say, you have the physical body, which is the physical body. Then you have the emotional body, which is like an overcoat put on the physical body. The mental body is another overcoat, and the identity is another overcoat. And the conscious you is then entering into these 4 layers. And now you're experiencing everything from inside these 4 layers. And the reason why this is important is because, as the question says, where does our consciousness go when we sleep or in a coma? And our consciousness is what I'm saying. That's the conscious you. It's the conscious you that makes us conscious, that gives us self-awareness. But the conscious you, you can say that the conscious you is actually pure awareness or neutral awareness. In other words, you have an outer personality, and part of it is your identity body, where you identify yourself as a certain person. You are a man or a woman, you are from this nationality, this culture, this religion. This is your sense of identity. But this is not who you are. This is not who the consciousness is. The consciousness is that conscious you. Now, if you go into these 4 lower minds or 4 lower bodies, you experience yourself from the inside, and you forget that you are a spiritual being. You forget that you are neutral awareness. You identify yourself with these 4 vehicles you have taken on. And so the question is, what are the contents in those, especially in your emotional, mental, and identity body? How limiting are they to you? Because that will determine where the conscious you goes when you go to sleep or you're in a coma, or even after the body dies. So there are people in the world who are very, very focused on, identified with their physical bodies. And when they go to sleep, the conscious you can't really travel very far beyond the physical body. The conscious you might, stay with the physical body. And the dreams that you have at that level are just what is produced in the brain. A lot of dreams we have are just produced in the brain, because the brain never sleeps. There's always activity in the brain. So if your conscious you is very identified with the body, that's pretty much where you stay. Then there are some people that are more identified with their feelings, with their emotional minds. And they might go to the emotional level when they sleep, and they might have dreams that are caused by whatever they experience there. And some go to the mental, some go to the identity, and some have a higher level of attunement. They can go to the retreats of the ascended masters in the ascended realm. Many spiritual people have what you call lucid dreams. And that's really where you either go to the higher identity or the conscious you really goes outside the four lower bodies. And you can have these more lucid dreams. So it depends on your level of consciousness where the consciousness goes. Now, I understand that scientists will, of course, deny all of this. But that's because materialistic science is actually limiting science. Materialism isn't science. It's an ideological overlay put upon science that prevents scientists from really acknowledging the role of consciousness and how important consciousness is. Of course, there's many scientists that are beginning to question that. If you're interested in that topic, scientists beginning to investigate consciousness, just search on YouTube for Donald Hoffman and Bernardo Castro. They have some fantastic videos about what they're doing from a scientific perspective. So to get back to the question, the conscious you, depending on how identified it is with these four levels of the mind. When you fall asleep or in your coma, conscious you leaves it may not leave the physical body completely, but in some cases it leaves the physical, goes to the emotional, sometimes it goes to the mental or the identity level. And you can have various experiences there that you may or may not remember. So the same goes if you're in a coma. Now, the second part of the question is non-duality, teachers of non-duality. And I don't think all non-duality teachers teach this, but the question is focused on teachers who say that deep sleep, where nothing is happening, is our true nature. And a world where there's movement, where there's differentiation, is an illusion. And as the question says, these teachers say we need to awaken the deep sleep inside us. That's a nice expression, right? We need to awaken the deep sleep. How are you going to awaken deep sleep? The whole idea of deep sleep is that it's not awake, right? So it's sometimes I have to wonder how people can come up with this kind of stuff. But I know, of course, that at the mental level, you can come up with all kinds of arguments and counter arguments and this and that. So I understand why the person is confused if you have studied some of these teachings. But as I've explained in many of my non-duality videos, it's not correct to say that only the undifferentiated consciousness is real. It's nonsense, as I say in my video about the nonsense of non-self. You just need to ask yourself a simple question. If there's one underlying reality that is not divided, that is not two, where did the world come from? Why did the world come into existence? It can only, if there's one underlying reality, the world can only have come from that one reality. That means there was something in this reality that decided to create the world and did, including creating us. So why did it do that? And the non-duality teachers who are saying this kind of stuff, they only have one answer. They don't have an answer. Because there is no purpose. The purpose for our existence is that we awaken the deep sleep inside of us so we stop existing. But it doesn't answer the question of why we came to exist in the first place. Because it must have been the one reality who decided to create us. Otherwise, how could we exist? We couldn't have brought ourselves into existence, right? It wasn't some kind of cosmic accident that brought it into existence. Because if there is only one undivided reality, where's the room for the accident? So as I explain in my non-duality videos and in my video about how the world was created, our world of form started with one self-aware being called the Creator, who had attained a level of consciousness where it can create an entire world. And it started creating our world. And it created out of its own consciousness, out of its own being, self-aware extensions of itself. We start out with a very point-like, localized sense of self, and we are meant to transcend that sense of self, expand our sense of self, until we reach the same level of consciousness as the Creator, which means we can become creators if we choose, but also by going through this process from a point-like sense of self to the Creator consciousness, we come to appreciate and understand the Creator's being and the process that the Creator used to create our world. That's the whole purpose. So our true nature is not deep sleep. Our true nature is self-awareness. The same self-awareness of the Creator, because our self-awareness comes from the one mind. And this all boils down to this belief that anything that's differentiated is a duality. But as I explain in my non-duality videos, this is a fatal misunderstanding. The duality is a state of mind, where you go into what I call the duality consciousness, that makes it appear as if you, who are an extension of the Creator's own being, the duality consciousness makes it appear as if you are a separate being. And that illusion, that is the illusion, that we are separate beings. And that the world is separate from the Creator, that's another layer of the illusion. So what we need to awaken in ourselves is our true nature, which is that we are an extension of the Creator's being. We are out of the Creator's self-awareness. And we are here to transcend our current sense of self until we reach the Creator consciousness. That's what we need to awaken in ourselves. And that is not deep sleep. And the whole concept, I mean, how do people come up with this stuff? I mean, non-duality teachers say that deep sleep, where nothing is happening, is our true nature. But you see, in deep sleep, there is a potential for awakening. As I said, the conscious you goes into the state of deep sleep, but it can awaken from there. So there is something that can awaken. Okay? If you have a concept of enlightenment or awakening, something must become enlightened that isn't enlightened now. There is something that somehow forgot its true nature and now has to re-remember. If our true nature is deep sleep where nothing is happening, in other words, our true nature is undifferentiated. How did we forget this? Do you really think that Brahman could forget itself? That undifferentiated awareness could forget itself? If there's no differentiation, okay? I know we can't fathom this with the linear mind and the intellect. But at least try to think about it. If there is no differentiation, what can forget itself and come to believe it's a separate being? If there's no differentiation, there is no differentiation. There is no awake. There's no non-duality, no duality. So, there was a being, a distinct being called the Creator. who created the world of form, set up the parameters, then sent self-aware extensions of itself into the world of form it had created. And we have two options as self-aware beings. We can expand our sense of connection with our higher selves and ultimately with the Creator, or we can go into duality and we can go into separation where we use the duality consciousness to create the illusion that we are separate beings. But there is a being, the conscious you, who can forget its true nature. Because if there wasn't, how could we forget? How could there be a differentiation between our true nature and the undifferentiated awareness? That's why I'm saying duality, this is the fatal misunderstanding. Duality is not in the world. Duality is in our minds. It's an illusion created in our minds by going into this specific state of consciousness, using the duality consciousness that always defines two opposites, two polarities. You see, the whole idea that we are asleep, that we are in a state of illusion. The state of illusion is a creation of the mind. And it's perfectly true. We have, as I said, we have been given self-awareness and free will. As a part of experimenting with free will, we are able to go into this, create this separate self that thinks it's a separate being. And that is an illusion. Perfectly correct. The problem is that when we then become open, when we have experimented enough with this separation and we get tired of it, when we become open to the possibility there's something outside separation, we are then using the separate mind to project a mental image of what it means to be outside of separation. But how did we get into separation? Oh yeah, we created a mental image in the mind and projected this upon ourselves and the world. So we think we are experiencing through the filter of that separate image, that mental image. And now we think that in order to get out of the mental image we have created of the separate self, we have to create another mental image, which is that our true nature is undifferentiated. And there's nothing there. There's an old Buddhist text that says that both samsara and nirvana are the same thing created by the mind. Because when you are in the separate state of mind, you have used the duality consciousness to create one dualistic extreme, namely separation, where everything is differentiated. But now you get tired of that, and now you are using the mind again to project that there's something outside of this separation, and it must be the opposite of separation. And since separation, you think, comes from differentiation, the opposite of separation must be that there's no differentiation. But that's again duality. You're using the dualistic mind to project a mental image of what it means to escape the dualistic mind. And what we need to do is awaken to the reality that we are a conscious, self-aware being that is not the separate self, but neither is it nothing. Neither is it no self. It is an individual self that has the potential to transcend itself. And the purpose for going into duality and separation was ultimately to transcend our sense of self, because by going into this state of separation, the I am presence, as I explained in several videos, gains valuable experiences. And we can come to the point where we can choose, I no longer want to experiment with my free will based on separation and duality. I want to permanently to ascend that level, and that's when you ascend to the spiritual realm and you become an ascended master. So, how screwed up can you possibly get? How convoluted can it possibly get? That you are at first you're creating the illusion of separation, and then from the state of separation, you think you're creating the solution, the way out of separation. But it just brings you into another form of duality, another form of separation. There's no escape from duality from duality. But there is the escape that the conscious you can become aware of its true nature, which is neutral awareness. But really, neutral awareness in the sense that it's not the outer personality, but when you then go into that neutral awareness, you start connecting to your higher self and you realize, that is my true nature. My true nature is my higher self, not the separate self. And so that's really what it means. And I mean, I understand how people get themselves into this blind alley, because they come to see the limitations of the separate self. But then they are using the separate self to plot a way out of the separate self. And I don't understand why they can't see that that is impossible. Well, I understand it in the sense that they must not have experienced their higher selves. They must not have experienced that there's more to them than the outer self. They must have still have some mental overlay where they are reasoning and they are saying, yes, but I see the limitations of the separate self. That means the way out of the separate self is to have no self. I understand this intellectually, but I just can't understand how people can be trapped in this for very long, because there's just got to, and I see videos out there where people have started awakening from this illusion, saying this can't be all there is, this non-duality stuff. This can't be the final answer. And to me, it was just, when I saw this, I connected to my higher self, and I realized, well, that is, as far as we can come to here on earth, that's the final answer, is oneness with the higher self. And then we get a whole different perspective, and then we can start looking at the bigger universe that we can't really experience from these limited perspective we are in here. So anyway, I know I'm rambling on, but I hope this helps some people get out of this bubble, because it really is a bubble that you think that your true nature is nothingness.